As we move away from our Learning Module 1, where we've read some longer epic poems and some shorter poems, sort of stories by Chaucer, we're turning our attention now to the 16th century and the 17th century in Learning Module 2. And this time, our readings are mostly going to be very short. We're not going to be reading stories anymore. We're going to be reading what are called lyric poems. Now, I know most of us are familiar with lyrics when we talk about music. We talk about the words of music being the lyrics. But when we talk about lyric poetry in literature, we're talking about any short poem that, instead of telling a story, focuses on a feeling or an idea or a state of mind. And so they don't have a plot. There's not a series of actions. And these poems are often, not always, but often organized by metaphors. Now, in the 16th and 17th century, if the poet used a metaphor throughout the poem, that is, one metaphor that they played with throughout the short lyric, it was called a conceit. That's right. So we're not talking about a poem that's stuck up or arrogant. We're simply talking about a poem that uses a metaphor, a sustained metaphor throughout. Now let's back up. I know these are literary terms and, we don't work with these every day. A metaphor is nothing more than a comparison. But it's a comparison where you take one thing that is maybe usually tangible and you compare it to something surprising that may not be so tangible. For example, when Sir Thomas Wyatt was translating the Petrarch sonnet, he talked about the long love that in his thought doth harbor. Let me read you just the first couple of lines of this poem. The long love that in my thought doth harbor, and in mine heart doth keep his residence, into my face presseth with bold pretense, and therein campeth, spreading his banner. So you see, just in those first 4 lines, love starts as a thought. Can't get this woman out of his mind, out of his thoughts. But love, this warrior, marches down into his heart and sets up residence. That's where he's going to live. And then presses into his face with bold pretense, like comes up to where he anytime he thinks about her, his face shows it. He reveals his attraction to this woman. And therein love campeth, spreading his banner. And the idea is the military, the banner of war spreads, and it's really like a blush spreading across his face when he thinks of this woman and how much he cares for her. Okay, we're going to be running across these conceits, these metaphors, throughout the short lyrics that we'll be reading in Learning Module 2. Don't be afraid of them. Just take your time to think about what is the poet comparing his feeling to. If he's comparing his feeling of love to a soldier, then that helps you understand what he's doing with the poem. The other thing to look for is the verbs. Often the verbs, like harbor, I know we think of harbor as a noun, but he's using it as a verb. The long love that in my thought doth harbor. So often the verbs are the figurative verbs. That is, they're verbs that imply the metaphor. So, long and the short of it is, you're going to be reading shorter works, but you're going to have to slow down, and you're going to have to look not for a plot, but for metaphors. If you do that, then the readings for this next learning module may not be quite as intimidating, and more importantly, you may find yourself enjoying this kind of reading, even though it's not the kind of reading that you do on an everyday basis. So good luck in reading Sir Thomas Wyatt and Henry Howard, the Earl of Surrey, and all the other 16th century poets. I'll be talking to you later. Bye.